Managing a small team or business comes with a unique set of challenges. With limited resources and manpower, it's easy for things to feel chaotic and out of your control. How can you, as a leader, accomplish your goals while keeping your team engaged, effective, and accountable? This podcast will give you practical strategies you can implement now to lead your team or business to reach its fullest potential. Welcome to the Organizing Chaos podcast with your host, Danny Coleman.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning into the Organizing Chaos podcast, where we talk about small practical strategies for small teams and small businesses. And today I'm really excited because I have on the show with me today, Mr. Josef Shapiro, who is the founder of Clear and Open, which is it's a podcast, correct? As well as just your brand.
Managed to Engage is the name of my podcast.
Okay, Managed to Engage is the name of your podcast. And then founder, Clear and Open then is your business name.
Yes.
Correct? Great.
Yep.
He's a leadership mentor, has a lot of amazing content that really connected me to him in the first place on LinkedIn, has a lot of wisdom, and I really just love the way that you present yourself and your business. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about kind of how you got here to this. And those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, you should watch it on YouTube because your office totally brings me peace. I want to get my office the way that you have. But I think one of the things I really liked and that drew me to what you had to say was you have a very Zen way of business, really. And I think that's something that, it's missing, like that kind of simplicity around business, So anyways, yeah. So I'm kind of talking over. Tell us a little bit about how you got to this place.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting story. And it's I love the Organizing Chaos title and concept because that's very much what was going on in my life then. And, in many ways still is now. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
I was living in the Bay Area, but the only goal I really had was to become a great martial artist in my 20s. And I was studying Aikido at the time, the Japanese martial art, and the teachers of my dojo had a leadership consulting practice where they used the principles of Aikido and, would show people movements and travel around and do basic Aikido with people. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, if they had a big enough gig, they would take students from the dojo and let them help out. And, mostly they wanted people that they could throw around for demonstrations. And so, it looked cool and was impressive. And so I got to go on some of their gigs and help out in very small ways. And I just thought management consulting was the coolest thing. And, here my teachers were doing it and, making good money and blowing people's minds. And so I was like 25, 26, and I wanted to be a management consultant. And I had very little work experience and just a lot of passion and dreams.
Yeah.
And longer story shorter, I fell into a job at eMyth, one of the companies that invented business coaching in the 70s. And, their promise is, of course, we'll teach you everything you need to know. You just have to be a good people person and have a passion for learning. And so I was an employee as a coach there for 3.5 years. Then I opened up my own practice. Then I returned to eMyth as an executive for a few years. Long story, how and why, but I wrote curriculum for eMyth. I oversaw sales, marketing, training. I developed their coach training program.
Wow.
And we did quite a lot to transform the company. And then in the end, I realized I really just love working with people one-on-one and doing my own thing. And I moved to Maui and coach from, 10 feet from where I sleep downstairs.
That's the dream. Like literally the dream, not just the working from home, but then your home being Maui.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good, I admit.
Well, very cool. So tell me a little bit about kind of what how you help business owners and leaders in what you do.
I've been doing this 17 years now, which makes me feel quite old. And the more I do it, the more simple it seems to become. And really, the way I think about it now is it's just about helping people to return to reality. Because what I've found is all of the tools and the methods and the insights, if the person doesn't have an orientation toward really wanting to abide with what's true, what's real, what makes sense, then none of those tools really are worth anything. And I know you're big into organizations. So I'll use an example. I had a client once, he was actually the guy who turned me on to David Allen's Getting Things Done, I don't know,
Mhm.
8, 9 years ago, maybe longer. And uh, he loved geeking out on all the GTD stuff,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
he knew it really well, but he never got out of overwhelm, because overwhelm is not a mental thing, and it has nothing to do with what you do. It has to do with how you relate to life itself. And for many people, overwhelm is an addiction no different than drugs,
Yeah.
where they literally don't know who they would be if they weren't running around with their, like a chicken with their head cut off.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of what drove me to the kind of work that I do now. So do I help people create systems or direct them to create the systems that they need? Absolutely. Do I help teach them how to manage people? Absolutely. I do branding, financial management, operations, all sorts of stuff. There's very little about business that, in a broad sense anyway, that I haven't learned and worked with. But
Mhm.
what it always ends up going back to is their relationship with themselves and other people. And if they're not willing to look at their shadow, their fears, their unproductive patterns of behavior, their distortions of reality,
Mhm.
if they're not willing to look at that, then none of those tools are worth anything, because
100%.
they either won't use them or they'll use them in a distorted way, like using the GTD system to get a lot done and stay overwhelmed, which
Yeah.
is not the point of what he teaches,
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean, so it's what I've noticed just in my short time consulting. But I mean, so I'm not sure how much you might have caught up on me, but whatever. I have 10 years of small business experience,
Hmm.
and I didn't go to college, or I mean, I started. I didn't fit. I got bored with it.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. And so I realize, and I consider myself a people person, not like in the cliche way. I was talking to someone earlier today because I mentioned to you I'm running for county commission in my county. And I told the guys, like, what I've learned is that it's how can you talk to someone and understand how they see themselves? And once you
Mm.
can understand how they see themselves, you can present alternative ideas without offending them. Because once you've offended them, their shields go up. So in my consulting, that's the biggest common denominator I've found. And honestly, I'm a little bit overwhelmed myself in terms of trying to figure out how do I approach that. How do you get to help people? So talk a little bit, if you
Mhm.
would, just about like how is it that you help people change, because that ultimately that's where it all is. I know so many people who bought all these courses and whatnot, it's like you're talking about, but it's the they've not changed as a person yet. So how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could probably talk for 8 hours straight about it. It's one of the questions I'm most passionate about answering. And I say that because I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I have methods and tools and ways of relating to it. One thing I would say is about the how do you help people change without offending them. One of the things I do is I help people to become not offendable,
How?
because I see, yeah, how. Well, it starts with the principle of realizing that offense, the state of being offended, is
Mhm.
a defense. So if you just help people understand that the only reason people get upset is usually when it's true.
Oh man. Yeah.
So I mean, I generally don't work with people who aren't at least a little bit willing to look at their own BS.
Yeah.
I just did a mediation yesterday with a couple of business owners who were in a conflict, and I normally don't do that kind of thing. And I really wanted to not take sides, but one of the partners was less in reality than the other.
Hmm.
And so what I did with him was I cut through his fallacious logic,
Hmm.
like the flaming sword of Hinduism, but only after I made sure he could experience that it was coming from a place of care.
Mm.
So and even amidst it, so one of the principles is uh, one of my earliest clients actually who had horses said to me once, I think it was a Roy Rogers quote or something like that, a horse doesn't care how much you know until he knows how much you care.
I didn't know that that was attributed to a horse.
I don't know who said it.
Okay.
But the point of it is, the more love
Uh-huh.
and respect you can make that person feel that you feel for them, the wider the door is for the difficult insights to be delivered. So what I see mostly in coaches and in managers as well, because managers have to do this too, is they stay in a muddy middle. They don't really see the person clearly, all of their gifts that they're talking about, that they have, and they don't ever really get specific about what's great about them, and they don't get ever really specific about what's not great about them. And so it's a narrow range. So when you widen that and you say, wow, like what I said to this guy yesterday, I was like, you have a powerfully analytical mind, and I can see you think really fast, like an attorney would. And I can see you've got a big picture, and you're able to easily take industry standards and compare them to the existing numbers, and all of that's great. But do you realize that with your head and all these numbers, you've alienated every other member of your team? And you're not really paying attention to that. And all of that knowledge doesn't work. You're hurting yourself and making it so that people can't listen to you because you're not paying attention to the relationships you have with these people, which is actually more important. Because the worst, and I told them that very quote, because they don't care how much you know until they can actually feel that you care about them. Now, that's something that could really rock someone's world.
Yeah.
Because, whatever self-image that person has about how good a people person they are or whatever, you're challenging that reality. So one of the things I did with these gentlemen before I engaged with them is I said, count on feeling some emotional discomfort when we meet. I don't know what it's going to look like, but that's your work. I'm going to show you what the reality is, and it's going to be your job to deal with the emotional discomfort of that. So that's another thing. You've got to love them, literally. They've got to feel that care, that affection from you. And they also have to know that emotional discomfort is going to be par for the course. Those are two really important pieces. There are others.
That's good. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I feel like, what's difficult about that sometimes, like when you acknowledge the things that they're good at. And we're talking about this a little bit, kind of like from you coaching, working with
but let me interrupt, because a lot of people, that's an important distinction. It's not what they're good at doing, it's what they're good at being.
Okay, go further into that. Give me some.
Like, I think of this guy yesterday. He's analytical. I didn't say you're good at working with numbers. I said you have a mind like the guy in A Beautiful Mind. You can see patterns.
Yeah.
You're near genius, if not genius, at being able to see things. That's your gift. That's you. That's a talent. So you're not pointing to what they're doing. You're pointing to who they're being.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a key distinction that a lot of people don't get. And it's a skill, being able to see that in people. And here's how you do it. Because it's easy usually to see what they're good at doing, right? So then you ask yourself, who are they being such that they can do that so well?
Yeah.
Determined, hardworking, honest, vulnerable, emotionally porous, fortitude. What's the qualities of being that they have? Because that's what needs to be seen. Because and there have been studies done about this, about when you praise people at the level of doing versus praising at the level of being. People want to be seen. They're hungry to be seen. And when you say good job, they don't feel seen. Good job cleaning up those books. Okay, a little better, but still they don't feel seen. Wow, you're so passionate about detail orientation, and you stuck through it. And I know that must have been tedious sometimes, but you stayed with it. And I really acknowledge your determination, punctiliousness, and care about the outcome of this project. That's
a great use of the word punctiliousness. I don't get to hear that often. I don't know if I have heard that for a long time. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I remember that you reminded me, and I don't remember where I read it now, but it was talking about just like how to praise your employees. Same thing, you don't say like, hey, you did a really hey, good job at that. Like at getting that contract secured or whatever. It's like, I love your creativity.
Yeah.
And, and you go into it that way. And that's you're right. It does take more, it takes so much more intention from you as a leader to do that. But just what I was going to say too, is just what we're talking about now, how you're helping leaders. That's exactly, or I guess, I don't know. I won't make the statement, but would you see that also similarly, how leaders should be interacting with their direct reports?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too.
I mean, the need to be seen is like one of the most upstream, basic, essential emotional needs that all people have.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it with everyone in my world. I'll do it with the person who I get the safety check on my truck with, the checkout clerk at the grocery store. It's just, that's a way of being, because if that's what people want, and that's actually a direct relating, like, I'm seeing how you're being and I'm going to talk about it here. Why not do it with everyone all the time?
Yeah.
You know? And then what you find is, if that's just the way you live, then it's actually not difficult at all, because you don't have to turn it on if it's just who you are. You're just someone who sees people. And you know what? People really like people who see people.
Yeah.
They will love you for it. It gives you, I mean, because in an employee situation where there's already so much authority projections going on, right? You're their new parent, and they already hate you because you're the boss on some level, right?
Yeah.
Unconsciously or not.
Yeah.
When you see them, more than likely you're giving them something they always wanted from their parents and never got.
Wow. Yeah. 100%.
Do you know what kind of loyalty that creates?
Intense. Yeah.
More than money can buy.
Yeah.
Because it's actually a real relationship. And so when they go, I feel like I could get paid more, and then they think, oh, but I feel so seen and gotten and understood, and I get to, be myself here.
Yeah.
That's a competitive advantage for a culture.
Yeah. They might not even be able to articulate it.
Usually not.
That they might not even know.
You're right.
It's huge that you say that, because that was a big thing for me with the last place where I was an employee. That's exactly the transformation that I went through with my bosses there. One of which is now a business partner of mine. And when I don't know how long they had to push through my own like emotional, trauma or whatever, from either past jobs or maybe, like childhood and stuff like that. And that's something that I want to bring big time, is exactly what you're saying there, bringing that to small businesses. And the types of businesses that I'm working with are like, we're talking like coffee shops, restaurants, brick and mortar, kind of mom and pop sort of places that don't really they don't tend to embrace kind of this philosophical way about thinking about their business. It's a lot more straightforward and pragmatic. And it is the whole, good job at sweeping that up, type way of praising. But I think that this is just like, it's so huge, and everyone has the capacity to develop this within themselves. Maybe people are at different places, along the spectrum, but I think that everyone has the capacity to develop this.
Absolutely. And I would love to speak to the philosophy question for
yeah, please do.
I get that a lot. And I know you weren't coming from that place, but a lot of people.
I was going to go there actually, so it's all good.
Okay, good. They'll get exposed to my work, read something I write here, a podcast, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, this sounds philosophically sound, but it's not grounded in reality or something." Or, we don't have time for philosophy. We've got to deal with the pragmatics of business. And so, what I would say is, I'm so sorry that you are a victim of what happened to philosophy over the last 300 or 400 years, because philosophy didn't used to be an abstract thing. It was a set of values and principles that you lived your life according to. It wasn't something that you just thought about in an armchair. And somehow philosophy, I don't know when, I imagine probably shortly after the Renaissance, probably when the Industrial Revolution started, and we all got too busy, right?
We all got really pragmatic. Yeah,
exactly. We got too busy to think about how to live our lives.
Yeah.
And that became background instead of foreground at best. And so what I would say is, all human beings are philosophers, whether they realize it or not. You are operating with beliefs, assumptions about reality, people, truth, and just for most people, they don't realize what it is, right? So if we talk about the being versus doing thing, praising someone doing, people, right now there are millions of managers who are testing and operating with the philosophy that praising employees at the level of doing is what is necessary. They don't know that they're doing that, but that's the assumption they're living inside of.
Yeah.
And so we come along and say, well, hey, try praising at the level of being, because people need to be seen and blah, blah, blah. And then they might go, well, that sounds too philosophical. Oh, really? No, it's just a different philosophy than what you don't realize you're using now.
Yeah. Wow. That's good.
Philosophy is supposed to be just testing. We're all testing beliefs. Nobody has
Yeah.
it all figured out. We're just testing a model. So wouldn't you want to know what model you're testing?
Yeah. Okay, so let's get practical here. No, I was kidding.
Mhm.
But
I'm
like really,
game for that.
where can someone start to kind of make these changes in themselves? Like, so maybe they've got an inkling that that they've not been doing it right, or they're seeing that what they wholeheartedly feel should be working isn't working. Where do they
Mhm.
start to kind of like understand this and develop?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say that's the safest bet for where to start, because when I work with people, I'm always customizing stuff.
Mhm.
So, but the one of the universals is if an individual is overwhelmed in any way, shape, or form, that is going to be an obstruction to any change, because overwhelm makes people stupid and unconscious.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't want to embark on any change firing on 3 out of 4 cylinders, because that's
Mhm.
what overwhelm does to you. It makes you less capable. And I remember the moment, I've been coaching so long, I started when it was literally a telephone, and then it
Wow.
became, internet audio. And then I started doing video with people. And that was when I had the aha. I was working with people, and for the first time I was seeing them with a camera, and I was seeing stacks of papers on their desk, on the floor, cluttered cabinets behind them. And your office looks pretty good.
It's all right.
Yeah. And I was having a hard time concentrating, and it wasn't even my stuff.
Yeah.
And then I read David Allen's book, and I started to get it, like, oh, overwhelm, the distraction. This is why people are doing such crappy work. So it's like, write a vision, create performance metrics, redo your org chart. If that person's overwhelmed, they're going to either not be able to do it, or
Mhm.
they're going to do a really bad job of it, which is actually even worse, because they're going to put in the effort and then think, well, writing a vision didn't work. Yeah, because your vision was like a stick figure. That doesn't work. You
Yeah.
spent 20 minutes on it while you were eating the night before it was due. And yeah, it doesn't work that way, because the higher level development, the entrepreneur and managerial mindsets are not available to an overwhelmed person.
Yeah.
It's just like being in survival mode.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
why all the great art and science and the history of of world culture always happened during times of peace. Have you noticed? Right?
I'd not thought about that.
The
Well,
golden age of Greece, right? When there's peace and prosperity,
yeah.
they can be creative, they can innovate. When
Uh,
there's war and famine and strife and stress, new things don't get created. Why? Because the people are dumber then. In short, so
yeah.
the task is always, before you do anything, you put your oxygen mask on first. You make sure that you're bringing all of you to that project.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So, as far as maybe something like a book that you would recommend, because honestly, I think the time is I've lost track of the time. Honestly, this is so good. I could talk for a long time about this, and if you're interested, or if you'd be open to it, I'd love to do another episode with you at some point.
Sure.
But what's like can someone start? Like as far as like a book, or maybe an exercise or a strategy or something like that that they can try to just kind of kickstart this themselves.
Well, if overwhelm is the issue, and I'm not saying it necessarily is, I just said that's the first place to look at. I'm a big fan of David Allen's work. I mean, I use a lot of his principles, and I live according to a lot of his practices. But there's lots of people who are into getting organized. I have a course called Clear Workspace Open Mind
Yeah.
that is about getting organized, and I start a lot of my clients on it. And one distinction that I really want to make is that I don't think is implicit in David Allen's work, but not explicit. In my version of getting organized, it's explicit. And that is that there's an external part of getting organized, inbox zero,
Mm,
using an electronic calendar, having your desk clear of things that are meaningful to do something with. You'll
mm,
notice in my office, it's like a Zen garden, right? There's no
yeah.
clutter around.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how my entire house is. That's how I keep it. But the key thing to get about that is the outer outer lack of clutter is about creating an inner spaciousness. That's really the point, because as I was saying before, I think we went live, I was talking about a client I had who really geeked out on all the getting things done stuff
Uh-huh.
and was a brilliant and consummate organizer, but he never got out of overwhelm because he didn't get the point. It's like the crime in a way of labeling it getting things done. I get why he calls his model getting things done,
Right.
because people want to get things done, but that's not the point. The point is having a clear mind. That's why I call my course Clear Workspace outside, open mind inside.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you can be very well organized and still cluttered on the inside.
Yeah.
That's what neurosis is, you know?
Yeah.
So whatever you got to do to keep your head clear, you know, that becomes your life. And so the quickest way to do that, I would say, for most people in this day and age, is to write down a list of all your projects. Not at the task level, but at the project level.
Okay.
Everything. You play an instrument that you're practicing, you're training for a triathlon, that goes all on the same list as all your business projects.
Okay.
And that's like what David Allen would call a 30,000 foot view, I think. Not the task level, but a little bit higher. What most people will see immediately is that they're overcommitted. And what happens is we take new things on without realizing, like, just like with budgeting, well, where's that going to come from?
Yeah.
You know, most people don't budget money, but people who do budget tend to budget money, but they don't budget time, right? So like a friend of mine wants to start a band a couple of weeks ago. He said, hey, what about a band? We could meet, you know, every 3 to 5:30, every Monday, 3 to 5:30. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's exciting. I want to do that. And then about 6 hours later, my mind started going, where's that time going to come from? Because I'm already operating at like 95% capacity.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I look at my project list and be like, okay, is one of these things going to have to go? Well, yes, it is. I'm going to hire out my yard work. So I'm not having to do that. Now I have time to do that because it's not just the 2.5 hours of rehearsal on Mondays. I'm going to be practicing 1.5 hours, 2 hours a day, having to learn the songs, you know, above and beyond the other practice I do for guitar. So there's a consciousness about time that you can't have unless you have a project list.
Yeah.
And you should look at that at least once a week.
It's good.
Because we live in an era where it's just more and more and more. If I just can do all of these projects, then I'll be happy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I totally get it. Because I mean, I get there every so often myself, and I'm probably a little bit there right now with this commission thing, but this was not planned. It was kind of like a call to thing, but that's, I'm looking around. I was talking with my business partner about this the other day. Just like, we're both of us are like looking at like, okay, what can we start striking?
Yes.
Because like, but I mean, but I want to come back to overwhelm real quick before we wrap this up. I think that's I hope that everyone who's listening gets that out of this. That's where to start. And I think honestly, with my own consulting, I'm going to start doing a better job at bringing that first, because when I meet people, the reason that they usually want to work with me is because they are overwhelmed.
Yep.
And I tend to just focus on organizing what they've got rather than pushing them to really cancel much of what they've got going on. And
yes.
I think that's
say, just like Nancy Reagan said, just say no.
Yeah.
and it's not a one-time thing. I still get overwhelmed sometimes and have to return to that. It's like in this day and age with the speed of communication and speed of business, it's a spiritual practice. It's an everyday, what can I say no to? You know, what can I cleave off here that I don't have to do? What can I delegate? You know, it's more important than probably it ever has been in the history of humankind. That's a really stunning thing to think about. The word no has probably never been this important.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct.
And that's a stunning thing to think about. And it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, I think that if we can figure that out in our lives and in the lives of the people that we're serving, that's like, it's not just about giving people what they want, but it's about giving them what they need.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other thing I would say, like, there are emergent results that come from getting organized. In fact, before Clear and Open, my practice was called Emergent Business because I wanted to, it's a terrible name really, but I wanted to capture that idea, because the way we tend to think is reductionistically. It's direct cause. That's how we're conditioned to think. But what you realize, you know, is going on at least half, if not more of the time, are what called emergent results. So it's like, what will happen when you get organized? I don't know. You're going to find out. There are some predictable results, like less stress, less anxiety, less fatigue, clearer thinking. There are some predictable results, but what I see time and time again is unpredictable stuff happens that's wonderful. I had a guy who was a produce distributor, which is one of the most insane industries I've ever seen. It's like, it makes commodities trading look tame, right?
Oh, wow.
Having 20 boxes of avocados you got to move in 12 hours or else they're going to be too soft. And, and doing that like times 100 products at a time. And the guy was one of the most stressed out people I've ever met. And it took about 6 weeks for him to get the idea of getting organized. Hey, why don't you take your father's old office and move into it? He doesn't use it anyway. Guy didn't have an office. He had like 50 employees, didn't have an office.
Oh, wow.
He was literally taking meetings, walking around the sales floor. Salespeople I would do a call with him and he'd get interrupted 7 times in an hour.
Oh, man. Yeah,
it was insane. Right. So he finally got organized. It took some pushing and he finally did it. And this was a guy who like would not remember things, like important things we'd talk about like the week before, like, hey, how many emails are in your box? And have you zeroed it yet? And he'd be like, no, we talked about that for the last 2 meetings and you didn't do it. And he like literally was dissociating. That's how full he was.
Wow.
And so he finally got organized and he sent me an email one day and it was this enormous spreadsheet. He said, yeah, I had some free time. So I just started planning some new product lines and here's an 18-month forecast of what I think I could do for the business. And I was like, who is this guy? He was a completely different person. He did not have those skills before. He must have because there they were.
Right.
But
yeah. They're buried.
They were buried. So and I'm not exaggerating where like the more overwhelmed someone is, the more excited I am because when you get organized, you're getting to take rocks off this geyser and then, wow, look at this thing that comes up. So we orient toward like, well, how can I grow? How can I be a better manager? How can I be a stronger leader? How can I, make my business grow? All of those are understandable questions, but the better questions are usually, how do I get out of the way of the growth? How do I set the conditions for growth? You don't grow a plant, it grows.
Yeah.
And so if you're overwhelmed, that's the ceiling of your business. That's the ceiling of your life. And you will be amazed and surprised and in awe of what will happen as soon as you just get out of the way. But that requires some trust, right? Because it's not really under our control when we do that.
Right.
And that's precisely why people don't like it. Because they want growth to happen the way they want it to happen.
Yeah, they want to push it to across the finish line.
Right.
This is gold. Thank you so much for being on the show, Joseph. This was absolutely amazing. I got so much out of this, and I know that my audience will too. Where can people find out more about you and connect with you?
Great question. Clearandopen.com is my website. You can search for Josef Shapiro, that's Josef as in Frank, or Manage to Engage, or Clear and Open will all lead you to the podcast in any podcast app. I've got, at this point, almost 200 episodes now. And they're all excerpts from my member webcast. I have a small community, a small group where I do group training. I do 3 live courses a year. And at courses.clearandopen.com, I have a bunch of courses that like Clear Workspace, Open Mind, how to hold people accountable, how to get organized, how to think critically, right now I'm finishing up a course called Managing with Inquiry, which is a management technique that has to do with asking deep questions and getting people to think for themselves. So there's a lot of content there.
Great, man. This is all also so much good stuff. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any kind of questions for me or you would like to be interviewed on the show, you have something of value to share with a small business audience, shoot me an email, danny@dannycoleman.me. You can check out my website, which is www.dannycoleman.me. Follow me on Instagram at @IamDannyColeman. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, share, like, all that fancy jazz. And leave me a podcast review too. I appreciate that. It would help me out. Thank you so much, everyone. Joseph, thanks for being on the show. Have a good one.
Want more? Go to DannyColeman.me to download Danny's free small business hiring guide, which includes tips, templates, and tools, plus a step-by-step process you can use to find and keep high-quality employees for your small team or business.